What's going on, guys? Capine here and welcome back. And in this video I'll be featuring a team I wasn't expecting to be featuring, but here we are. Malamar, Shadow Drapion, Diggersby. Over the course of the season, Annihilape has become the fighter of choice, but Malamar became extremely strong with the addition of Psywave, even becoming what I would say is underrated. I say underrated because even though it was heavily used when Psywave got added, Annihilape just drove it out when it got Rage Fist. However, despite that, Malamar is not to be messed with. Now, the reason why I'm featuring this team is because even though I haven't had a lot of practice with it besides today, I went positive in all 5 sets, as well as picking up back-to-back 4-1 sets, which I'll be featuring here. And with that, let's get right into the battles. Alright, getting to the first battle, we lead Malamar into Lokix. This is an interesting lead because if we do land a superpower, it does a lot of damage to him, but it does require a bait or just full sending and your opponent calling it. Now, I do go for the foul play, and foul play does get called, but that does a ton of damage. And I'm like, wow, that does a lot of damage for a resistant move. Like, I know Lokix is glassy, but like, what the heck? Then I look in the top right and I notice it's 872 CP. So, you know, that makes sense that they called the foul play there. I faced a Lokix earlier in like the set before this that shielded the superpower, which makes more sense because Lokix is very glassy and will kind of like one-shot it if you hit it with the superpower. But here, them being at the 872 CP, maybe picked the wrong Lokix or not fully powered up yet. That kind of makes sense considering they're like, okay, no use in shielding this, letting it go. But either way, if they do shield your first move, you will load up, fire, shield their next move, which could either be the Trailblaze or the X-Scissor, fire off your second move, which would be the superpower to either guarantee the KO and switch advantage or get their final shield. And if you do get their final shield, you'll just save swap into Shadow Drapion after that and see how it plays out. But here comes in the Azumarill. They are going to have to throw a move to take me out as they won't be able to bubble down in time before I reach another move. And now I'm actually going to bring in Malamar here. I am actually a little ABA weak to Azu lead, but Malamar does put up a fight with the Psywave damage as well as its faster pacing to its charge moves than Azu does have. So I do reach the first move, I do reach his second move, which ends up being on a CMP tie. And even though this matchup was already kind of over, the fact that that did end up being on a CMP tie does put the nail in the coffin as I bring in Diggersby and my opponent does concede. GG's. Next battle, we lead Malamar into Jumpluff. Negative lead, again, a little ABA weak to this, but Malamar does actually do kind of fine here. Load up on energy, throw in good timing, fire off the foul play that does land, and it does some hefty damage. And as you'll see, the Jumpluff is already in yellow HP here. I do decide to let it go, call the bait. They do full send the energy ball. And you know what? That's fine because we can survive that and they won't be able to fairy wind us down before we reach another move. So it will force them to have to throw another move. So they do throw another move. They do win the Zero Shield scenario, but look at the Jumpluff. It's already deep into the red HP and that's perfect. I bring my Drapion. I do get denied there as I get the one-turn bring in, but that's okay since they won't reach another move regardless. We get the Poison Sting down in exchange for a little bit of our health gone, and then they bring in a Primate. Now this Primate's a little bit tricky, especially considering I do have a Diggersby in the back. So my opponent probably has the advantage here, and because they have the advantage, I feel like I need to call a bait for a Rage Fist, and I do, and I get the bait call correct, which is massive. So now I can go for this Aqua Tail, get their first shield, and send in Diggersby. Now, this most likely is a Rage Fist, but I feel like I have to shield it because if it is a close combat, I'm just going to lose. So my opponent does go for the Rage Fist. Nice bait by them. And I'll fire off a Fire Punch in return before they reach yet another Rage Fist. In which in this case, I do give up yet another shield for the potential close combat. And yet again, it is another Rage Fist bait, so they can get extra Karate Chop damage. And now they come in Corsola. And Diggersby absolutely destroys Corsola. However, none of us have fast move pressure against each other since both of our fast moves are double resisted. Diggersby, however, can hit for neutral with the Fire Punch and Scorching Sands, while Corsola hits for double resisted with the Nightshade or single resisted with the Power Gem. And this is quite a dominant matchup for Diggersby, despite, like I said, both our fast moves being double resisted. So here I am just making sure I'm throwing on good timing and that a half health Diggersby is able to put some good work into the Corsola. I don't quite get the catch there of the move that I was hoping to get, but I do force them to throw regardless. And with forcing them to throw there, this match is over because even though I'm deep into the red here with my Diggersby, my opponent has a power gem that is not going to KO. We do have the fire punch stored, so we can under tap the fire punch. Video cuts off a little short there, but that fire punch does indeed KO. GG's. Next battle, Malamar into Diggersby. Now this is an interesting matchup. You could go for a superpower and dip into your next Mon or whatnot, but because I do have a Shadow Drapion behind it, and that would be the Pokemon I do dip into, I don't necessarily want to do that right away. So I do go for the foul play. My opponent does call that foul play, which is a little unfortunate. So I'm going to go for shield up their next move because that will do hefty damage, go for the superpower, and now I do a little bit of an orthodox play here. I'm honestly not sure how I feel about that in terms of if they call my first move, I shield and they go for the superpower. So I dip into Diggersby. Now in this case, it ends up working out because they don't have a hard answer to Diggersby. So they dump their energy into my own and end up staying in to the point where I now take them out with a fire punch. If they did have a hard punish to Diggersby, I would say this was definitely not the play, just to let their first Scorching Sands go. And you know, looking back on it, even if they do no-shield your first move and ends up being the foul play, just let their first Scorching Sands go. It's not going to KO, it's not going to threaten to KO. That gives you a bit more flexibility to play out in the end game. But with that amount of energy, I was able to overfarm one of my Diggersby, and they end up coming in with a Drapion here. So that ends up being a fantastic call in terms of swapping in my Diggersby after that, which again, in this matchup, it worked out, but in general, I don't necessarily recommend. That they end up having a Toxapex in back, which is great because I reach a second foul play right here. And those side waves plus the foul plays definitely do add up over time. Force them to waste some energy into my Malamar. Down it goes. Now I can just bring my Diggersby, get a nice little quick attack down, hoping here that I don't have to show my third Mon. So I go for the fire punch, but they do have the move stored. Take out my Diggersby. I will have to show my third Mon, of which I get the Poison Sting down on, and that is a good game. GG's. Next battle, Malamar into Serperior. I would say this is a slightly negative matchup for us just because of how good of a move Frenzy Plan is. So I'm going to load up on energy, shield the first move as it is most likely the Frenzy Plan. Serperior is probably not going to bait in this situation. So now I throw one more side wave and then the foul play for good timing. This will do some decent damage to the Serp. And as long as you're throwing on good timing here, you will outpace the next foul play before they reach their next frenzy. So if they do throw a move before you reach the foul play, you will know it's just the Aerial Ace and you can just let it go. So I do get their first shield back. And at this point, I can just let this go. My Malamar will get KO'd by the frenzy and I can bring in Drapion to Poison Sting down. They pivot. So I do have to be careful of that Serp in the back against my Diggersby later. But since I do know that they're dry or have one residual frenzy or Vine Whip, excuse me, that I will have to be mindful if I want to outpace with my Diggersby later in the game. Now they bring in Annihilate. I do shield, hoping they go for the Ice Punch, which they do. That allows me to get the Poison Sting down, which is massive here because now my Drapion is absolutely loaded on energy. They come in Dunsparce, so I can go for one more Sting, then a Crunch. Do some massive damage, yet another Sting, and another Crunch. This will most likely get their final shield, which it does. Now I can just save swap in my Diggersby, and with this energy lead, I will be able to win this game. They do try and go for CMB tie the frenzy there, but I'm not going to let that happen. I let that go. I do get the entire quick attack down. One more quick attack than the Scorching Sands for good timing. And here I'm not yet in Drill Run range. I do get the attack fall in the Scorching Sands there. Not necessary, kind of an insult to injury because I would be able to survive that Drill Run and a rollout regardless. But that just helps with the task there as Diggersby does hang on and we take the game. GG's. Next battle, Galarian Moltres. Now, a little bit of a core breaker to this team, but not too heavy. I'm just going to throw 11 sideways for good timing, then the superpower, and then dip into my Shadow Drapion. My opponent does shield it up, and now they stay in and fire off what could be a Brave Bird, so I do respect it with the shield. And then just being an ancient power, but that is okay, as my opponent now swaps into a Diggersby. And with that little Poison Sting lead that I had with my Shadow Drapion, I will be able to reach 2 Tails before they reach a Scorching Sands, which in a Diggersby counter swap into your Shadow Drapion safe swap is always very, very nice. And here, because I did overfarm by 1 earlier, I was hoping that it threw their counting off a little bit, which it looks like that did, as they do overfarm 1 too much, play to the CMP tie. I get a shield from them, and that is massive, because now they're down shields, and I have a sweeping potential with either my Malamar or my Diggersby. Gonna see what it is. My opponent does go for the Scorching Sands, and I was going to farm down so make a nice play and hard swap it into their Galarian Moltres. However, I get the attack drop, so that superpower does do a lot less damage than usual. In which case, my opponent does let me get to a Fire Punch, which doesn't KO. And that is the difference there in that Scorching Sands attack drop from my opponent or not, where my opponent does hang on to reach that Brave Bird, does do hefty damage to my Diggersby. And now here I do reach the Fire Punch. I throw it 1 before my opponent reaches a move, but they make a back-breaking catch on the Toxapex. Well played by them. I feel like if they didn't make that catch onto the Toxapex, I'd be in a very, very good spot here. Maybe not necessarily a very, very good spot, but an advantageous one. But in them making that catch, that's kind of the nail in the coffin, because I'll only be able to land 1 Scorching Sands before they take me out. And from here, they do reach a Brine before I reach a Foul Play. So that is a GG's. Well played to my opponent. Next battle, we lead Malamar into Alolan Ninetales. I'm going to throw a Sidewave, see what fast move they're on. I see they're on Charm, so I'm going to pivot into that Shadow Drapion. If they're on Powder Snow, I would stay in with the Malamar. So I pivot into Drapion, they come into Azu. I'm going to fire off this first Crunch. No debuff on the first Crunch, but that was okay. Here, my opponent actually throws their move right away. They throw it on Alignment, and they only have 5 bubbles, so this can only be an Ice Beam, which is perfect. Because by the Poison Sting head start I got on my Drapion, as well as them throwing on good timing, I will be able to reach a 3rd Crunch in this matchup, now being able to dictate switch advantage. And since they let that go, I get switch. And since that's a Charm Alolan Ninetales, that's exactly what I need so that I can put on to Diggersby. They can still hit me back for super effective with the Weather Ball, which I have to be mindful for, but I can hit them back for super effective with the Fire Punches here. So this is a Weather Ball. I will shield it up. They come in a Shadow Drapion, and I go for the bait. My thinking here is that if I land a Scorching Sands, it's just game over, so they kind of have to shield that. So that's why I went for the Fire Punch bait, and it did end up paying off. Now here I do go for the Foul Play. Now, at the time, I thought this was a smart bait, because I'm like, oh, they need to keep the Drapion around for the Diggersby to hit it with the Aqua Tails. And it's like, really? They're running a Charm Alolan Ninetales, and even though it was on the lead at this point, it's in the back. So it's their closer in this game. And it's like, your opponent's always going to save a shield for the Charmer. So looking back on it, that was pretty much a dumb bait. Should just full send the superpower. But either way, I feel like I'm in a decent spot here since I can fire off this Fire Punch. Always being sure to overfarm here, because I need to make sure that I outpace the Alolan Ninetales to 2 Fire Punches before they reach the next Weather Ball. There's 6 Charms away from the next Weather Ball, so I can just throw 7 Quick Attacks, then my own Fire Punch, as well as 1 Quick Attack, then my own Fire Punch, where they are now at their Weather Ball. So this should KO, which it does. And if it didn't, they would reach that Weather Ball, but we don't have to worry about that, as good timing and the damage is able to do the job for us. GG's. Next battle, Steelix Lead. Now this is a decent -C for my entire team. So I'm just going to stay in, especially with the potential to superpower dip. Now my opponent tries to make a foul play catch onto the Pangoro. They get a little too fancy, but because I'm continuously overfarm here, not only do I reach one superpower to guarantee the shield, but I reach a second superpower to guarantee their second shield. And from there, with my defense dropped as low as it is, I'm just going to send in Drapion. I'm going to force them to close combat here, because if they do, I can just bring my Diggersby and Fire Punch them, then go about the game from there, especially with the fact they have a Steelix lead and that the Steelix doesn't want to see my Malamar or Diggersby when they have 0 shields. So I let it go. They end up going for a Night/Bait, which is perfectly fine. I do land an Aqua Tail. Now they go for the close combat for KO, which, as I said before, I'm perfectly fine letting go. Now I could bring my Diggersby, shield the potential close combat, and get a full quick attack down. That's exactly what I get. And here we're most likely going to see what their third Pokemon is. I see it's an Annihilate, so I'm going to instantly pivot to my Malamar. I will reach a Foul Play if they decide to stay in, so they swap out. And now I'm just going to go for my superpower right away. I want to limit the amount of farm the Steelix is going to get. Like, I know that one superpower won't KO, but will get them deep into the red, as you can see. So I go for that right away to limit the amount of Thunderfang farm that they get. Now we're bringing Diggersby, tank 1 Psychic Fangs, tank 2 Psychic Fangs, but I will be able to get a very nice quick attack down to not only land 1 Scorching Sands, but to outpace them before they farm us down to a second Scorching Sands. That's a little bit of the upsides of running Diggersby against Shadow Annihilate, is that 2 Scorching Sands do easily KO. As you'll see, that video cut off a little bit, but that does indeed KO. Next battle, Clodsire Lead, slightly positive one for us. They swap it to an Air/Mana Buzz, and I do not have a good answer to an Air/Mana Buzz. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to superpower and then to my own Diggersby. My thinking here is that if they're running a Clodsire Lead, that they've got to have a good answer to Diggersby in the back, which is why I'm going to bring it into here against the Mana Buzz. Like, yeah, this is a negative matchup for the Diggersby, but if they have a Clodsire Lead, their third Mon is most likely even stronger into Diggersby than what the Mana Buzz is. So my call is that this is where I'm going to get the most use out of the Diggersby as I would elsewhere. As they hard swap in a Shadow Primeape, my prediction was correct that their third Mon is a stronger answer to the Diggersby than the Mana Buzz. So I do Scorching Sands, save the Diggersby for later, and then bring in my Malamar here. Because I know that I can't bring in my Shadow Drapion, as Shadow Primeape would kind of just annihilate it with a close combat and it becomes a heavy bait game. Where I also know that my own Shadow Drapion is not bad into the Clodsire, especially if I have a shield. So I bring my Malamar. I'm just barely able to get the Psywave down, land the Foul Play onto the Clodsire. And now from here, I will outpace the Scorching Sands before they reach an EQ. So my opponent makes a swap. I read the swap, which is why I keep over farming. So I do shield the move, bank my energy so I can take out the Clodsire later in the game, because Diggersby does win CMP over the Clodsire. Bring in my Shadow Drapion, get a beautiful Poison Sting down. And now I can just start firing off these Aqua Tails against the Clodsire. First one lands. Second one is going to land as well or get the final shield. And with the second Aqua Tail, this game is over because my opponent lets it go. I win. If they shield it, then I have the Scorching Sands stored onto my Diggersby, which, as I mentioned earlier, does win CMP over the Clodsire. So Scorching Sands does come through, and this will KO the Clodsire. GG's. Next battle, we lead Malamar into Talonflame. A little bit of an interesting lead here, but we do have to stay in. We're going to throw our Foul Play after 14 Psywaves, making sure it's on good timing. That is pretty crucial into this matchup, because if your opponent lets the Foul Play go, you can shield up their move and then get a full Psywave down. Now it does come down to DRE as to whether or not they get their second fly off or not, which if they do get the DRE, then you'll shield that up and farm down, and that's just kind of bad. But most of the time they will not get that move. You will get the full Psywave down and leave with quite a bit of energy here. which my opponent brings in more Pekko, so they're going to have to double shield this Morpeko with the back-to-back superpowers. Just not quite able to reach the third, but that is okay, as I do have a Diggersby behind it in order to tank their Aura Wheel or the Psychic Fangs. They go for the Psychic Fangs, which we let it go. And now we'll shield this up since it's a dark type Aura Wheel, and we'll do a lot, especially because our next will be an electric type Aura Wheel if they go for it. They swap into a Primeape, and here I'm thinking I'm in a pretty comfortable position. I should have this match won. I go for the Squishy Sandwich, does land. And now here, Shadow Drapion survives 4 Karate Chops and then a close combat on very low HP. So I'm like, all right, I'm in a great spot. Not against this Primeape. My opponent is running a very high attack Primeape in order for those 4 Karate Chops and close combat to KO. And at that point, not much you can do. Gotta tip your cap. Fair play to them, as down goes by Shadow Drapion and down goes to Diggersby. GG's. Next battle, Serp Lead. We've seen this matchup earlier. We know how to play it, but there's a bit of stutter lag in the beginning, and I'm not sure if I've lost out on any energy or not here. So in this case, because of the stutter lag, I played a little bit differently, but otherwise you should play it how I showed you in the first Serp matchup earlier in the video, where because I'm not sure if the stutter lag now allows them to outpace to their second Frenzy or not, I do settle for the superpower to force your shield back and then dip into my Serp. Very nice that they do empty their energy here, because if they stored that, that could be a problem later on, especially considering I have a Diggersby in the back. Well, they do hit me with the Frenzy and then come in with their own Shadow Drapion. And I know that at this range, I'm not quite in an Aqua Tail range yet. I can let that go and reach a second Aqua Tail, which is very, very nice. So this will do some hefty damage. They will hang on though and get a Poison Sting down. But I can bring in my Malamar, and I'm hoping that I can get a Psywave down in time. I just can't. I know that I wasn't able to get a quick attack down in time, but I was hoping that maybe DRE or whatnot would be able to help me there. But the Drapion's just a little bit too healthy. However, that Psywave lead does allow us to reach yet another superpower on the CMP tie against their own Serperior. So they let it go, saving a shield for more Pekko, but I do have the Diggersby for it, so they do concede. GG's. For this team comp, none of them really feel like the odd man out. They all have their job and perform really well at that. So going into the last week of the season, if nothing has quite clicked for you yet, I'd recommend giving this one a shot, because who knows, it may just do the trick. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate you. If you enjoyed it, please drop a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Love to hear what you have to say. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.